The feed bill arrived on the second Friday of every November. That was the pattern, had been since 1963. Merle Adcock would drive the half-mile of gravel road into Custer County, Nebraska, collect the statement from the co-op office on Pawnee Street, and sit in the truck cab reading it before he pulled back onto the highway. The numbers never improved, only moved in one direction. November 1971. The bill was $4,240. He set it on the passenger seat. Drove home. Set it on the kitchen table next to the previous year's, which had been $38,990. Merle was 48 years old. Had been running a cow-calf operation on 640 acres north of Broken Bow since 1955. His father had homesteaded the same ground in 1921. The soil was sandy loam, prone to wind, grudging with moisture. The cattle needed feed from mid-November through late March. 4.5 months, roughly, Merle was running 94 head that year. Each animal needed about 35 pounds of hay equivalent daily through winter. He was buying pelleted feed concentrate from the co-op at $4.10 per hundredweight, supplementing with whatever hay he could put up, which was never enough. The hay operation itself had problems. The ground north of the creek ran wet. The south section ran dry. Neither was ideal for alfalfa. Merle had tried alfalfa twice, lost one stand to winter kill in 1964, lost another to drought in 1968. He'd gone back to native grass hay, which fed adequately, but had low protein. The co-op concentrate filled the gap. It cost. His neighbor to the east, Walt Pritchard, ran 80 head and spent $3,800 at the same co-op on the same product. Said it was just the nature of the business. Said his father had bought from the same co-op. Walt wasn't wrong. Every cow operation in Custer County bought winter feed from somewhere, most from the co-op. The alternative was letting animals lose body condition through winter, which cost more at calving. Merle drove into Broken Bow in December of 1971. Went to the co-op, not for feed, but to ask a question. Spoke with the manager, a man named Lloyd Fenner, who had been running the office since 1959. Merle asked him what was in the pelleted concentrate. Lloyd told him. Corn, Milo, soybean meal, a mineral package, some molasses for palatability. Merle asked what the corn percentage was. Lloyd said it ran about 44% by weight in the winter formula. Merle asked if a man could build a comparable ration himself from his own grain. Fenner looked at him for a moment. Said it wasn't as simple as it sounded. Said the mineral balance in the pelleted product was formulated by nutritionists. Said the processing improved digestibility. Said he'd seen farmers try to cut corners on feed and pay for it at calving. Said Merle's cows had done fine for 16 years on the co-op product, and he didn't see a reason to start experimenting. Merle nodded. Said he appreciated it. He drove home. Sat at the kitchen table. Did arithmetic on a piece of paper he tore from a Purina calendar. 44% corn by weight at $4.10 per hundredweight. He was paying for corn he could grow himself. Had been growing it himself for 16 years. Had sold corn to the elevator every fall at prices below what the co-op was charging him to buy it back processed. He looked at the arithmetic for a while, then put the calendar paper in his shirt pocket. The following spring, Merle planted 80 acres of corn instead of his usual 55. The extra 25 acres came from ground he'd been keeping in native grass on the west edge of the property, ground that hadn't produced a cash crop in 11 years. The soil test on that section, taken in March 1972, showed adequate phosphorus but low nitrogen. He applied 80 pounds of nitrogen per acre and planted DeKalb XL45 at 22,000 seeds per acre on May 10th. The additional 25 acres cost him $620 to put in. Seed, fertilizer, fuel, his own labor at nothing. That summer, he also drove 40 miles to the county library in Broken Bow and asked the librarian for anything they had on feed formulation for beef cattle. She found him 3 extension publications. 2 from the University of Nebraska. 1 from Kansas State. He checked them all out. Sat in the kitchen 3 evenings reading them. Made notes on a yellow legal pad. His wife, Norma, watched him at it, but didn't ask. The extension bulletins confirmed what he'd suspected. A basic winter maintenance ration for a dry beef cow could be built from corn grain, a protein supplement, and a mineral mix. The protein supplement was the expensive part. Soybean meal ran $95 per ton at the time, but the bulletins also listed alternatives. Cottonseed meal, sunflower meal, and one that Merle read 3 times, field peas, which could be grown in Custer County and contain 22 to 24% crude protein by dry weight. Field peas in Nebraska in 1972. He'd never grown them, didn't know anyone who had. He wrote to the University of Nebraska Extension Office in Lincoln, explained what he was trying to do. Received a reply 6 weeks later from an agronomist named Curtis Halsey, who said field peas were a viable cool season crop in the Sandhills region, but that most producers weren't using them for that purpose. Said the main challenge was drying and storage. Said if Merle wanted to try, he should start small and not on his wettest ground. Merle wrote back, asked which varieties might work. Halsey wrote back again with 2 varieties. Took another 5 weeks. By the time the letter arrived, it was August. Too late to plant peas that fall. Merle put the letter in a folder he kept in the kitchen drawer. That winter, he fed his 94 cows the same way he always had. Bought $4,610 worth of concentrate from the co-op. The bill was $370 more than the year before. He read it in the truck cab on Pawnee Street, the same as always. Drove home. Put it on the table next to the others. In March of 1973, he planted 18 acres of Austrian winter peas in a field just east of the barn. Used a grain drill he borrowed from Walt Pritchard, who thought Merle was growing them as a cover crop, and said so. Merle let him think that. The peas went in on March 14th. Inoculant mixed into the seed at $1.80 worth per acre. No nitrogen applied. Peas fixed their own. The seed cost $4.40 per acre. Total cost for 18 acres, $113 in seed and inoculant, plus diesel. By the last week of May, the peas were 2 feet tall and blooming. Merle walked the field on a Tuesday morning, looked at what he had, and went back to the house without saying anything about it to Norma. He harvested the peas in early July, used the combine he owned, a 1964 Massey Ferguson 410, adjusted the cylinder speed down and the concave clearance up to handle the soft seeds without cracking them. Ran the crop through twice. Came out with 38 bushels per acre, 684 bushels total from 18 acres. He weighed a bushel on the platform scale in the machine shed. 60 pounds even. 684 bushels at 60 pounds per bushel. 41,040 pounds of field peas. At 23% crude protein, the midpoint of the range Halsey had given him, he had enough protein supplement to replace a significant portion of what he'd been buying from the co-op. He spent 2 evenings with the legal pad working out the ration. The extension bulletins described a maintenance ration of 20 pounds of corn grain daily and 3 pounds of 36% protein supplement for a dry cow in good condition. At current prices, that ration cost 94 cents per head per day from the co-op. Merle's corn cost him about 60 cents per bushel to raise, at the elevator price minus his basis. His field peas, at production cost, worked out to $0.31 per pound of crude protein delivered. The co-op's soybean meal was costing 29 cents per pound of crude protein. The peas were close, not cheaper yet. But Merle owned the ground and the equipment. The marginal cost of the next 18 acres of peas was mostly his own time. He planted 40 acres of peas in the spring of 1974. Same field and the north section behind the grain, put in a small grain bin that summer. Used $340 from a farm auction near Ansley, added a fan and heat element for $85, total drying and storage cost $425. The 1974 pea crop came in at 34 bushels per acre on the first field and 29 on the north section. The north section had run a little dry in July, average 32 bushels per acre, 1,280 bushels total from 40 acres, 76,800 pounds of peas. He started feeding the ration that November. His formula: 18 pounds of homegrown corn per cow per day, 2.5 pounds of whole field peas, 0.3 pounds of a commercial mineral mix he still bought from the co-op at $220 per ton. The cows ate it. That was the part he hadn't been certain about. Cattle will refuse a new feedstuff sometimes, especially one with an unfamiliar taste and texture. He watched the first feeding on November 9, 1974, stood at the bunk watching 94 cows work through the ration. They ate it the same as anything else. Peas and corn together, the mineral mix scattered over the top. He stood there for about 10 minutes. Then went to the machine shed. Walt Pritchard came by in late November. He came to return a set of post-hole diggers, and Merle showed him the feed operation. The grain bins with the corn, the smaller bin with the peas, the mixing procedure he was blending by weight using a bathroom scale, and a 5-gallon bucket to calibrate his tractor bucket loads. Walt looked at it, asked where Merle was buying the peas. Merle told him he'd grown them. Walt stood in the bin yard, then said he'd never heard of anybody doing that in Custer County. Merle said he hadn't either. Walt drove home. Merle went back to the mix calculation he'd been running. He was trying to work out the protein equivalency more precisely. The peas varied in protein content year to year depending on how well the inoculant had worked and what the moisture conditions had been. He'd started sending a sample to the state lab in Lincoln every harvest. Cost $8 per sample. Worth knowing the exact number. The 1974-1975 winter feed season ran from November 9th through March 21st. 132 days. Merle tracked every pound of feed mixed and fed. Kept a daily log in a spiral notebook he hung on a nail in the machine shed. Feed consumed: 11,880 pounds of 22,104 pounds of homegrown corn. 3,741 pounds of mineral mix purchased from the co-op. At the end of March, he sat at the kitchen table and worked out what the same ration would have cost from the co-op exclusively. The co-op's winter blend ran $4.90 per hundredweight that year. He would have needed roughly 4,800 hundredweight for 94 cows across 132 days. Total at co-op price, $23,520. His actual costs: corn grown at 63 cents per bushel production cost, peas grown at 28 per pound of protein, mineral mix at $220 per ton, plus the bin depreciation he'd spread over 10 years. Total actual, $9,840. The difference was $13,680 for one winter. He'd saved more than he'd expected. He checked the arithmetic twice. Got the same number. He wrote $13,680 in the spiral notebook at the bottom of the winter feed log. Underlined it once. Put the notebook back on the nail. The co-op bill that November had been $220. Just the mineral mix. Fenner at the co-op noticed it when Merle came in to pay. Didn't say anything at first. Then asked if Merle's herd numbers were down. Merle told him the herd was at 94, same as always. Fenner wrote the receipt. Merle took it, drove home. By the spring of 1975, word had reached the county extension office in Broken, not through Merle. He hadn't said much. But Walt Pritchard had mentioned it at the Farm Bureau meeting in February, and someone there had told the extension agent. A young man named Keith Dorsey, who had been in Custer County about 2 years. Dorsey called Merle in April. asked if he could come out and look at the operation. Merle said he could come on a Thursday. Dorsey came on a Thursday in early May, just as Merle was finishing spring field work. He walked the pea fields with Merle, looked at the grain storage setup, went through the feed logs in the machine shed. He was 28 years old, had studied agronomy at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. He asked careful, specific questions and wrote the answers in a field notebook. He spent particular time on the ration math. Went through the spiral notebook page by page. Asked about the mixing procedure, how Merle calibrated his bucket loads, how he distributed the mineral mix, whether he weighed individual cows or worked from an average body weight. Merle answered each question. He'd weighed a representative sample of 12 cows in November 1974 before the first feeding. Average weight, 1,050 pounds. He'd recalibrated from the same sample group in March. Average weight, 1,040 pounds. 10 pounds of body condition held across a 132-day winter. He'd never done better than that in 20 years of cattle. Dorsey wrote that down, underlined it. At the end of the visit, Dorsey said the system was sound, but that he'd been surprised it worked in Custer County soils. Said field peas were generally considered a Northwest Nebraska or panhandle crop. Merle said the agronomist at the university had said the same thing. Dorsey drove back to Broken. The following September, he published a single-page item in the County Extension newsletter. Titled it simply, On-Farm Feed Production in Custer County. Described Merle's system in general terms, didn't use his name. Said that one local producer had replaced the majority of his purchased protein supplement with homegrown field peas at a significant cost. 3 farmers called the extension office after that newsletter. Dorsey gave 2 of them Merle's phone number with his permission. Merle talked with both, answered their questions. Both tried a small acreage of peas the following spring. In 1976, Merle expanded to 70 acres of peas. Added a second small bin at the north end. That winter, he ran 102 cows. He'd added 8 replacements from his own calves. The feed cost for the winter of 1976-1977 came out to $11,200 against an equivalent co-op cost of $24,600. The savings $13,400, close to the same gap as the year before, slightly wider because the herd was larger and the pea yield had been good. 37 bushels per acre on the 70 acres, 2,590 bushels, 155,400 pounds of peas. He put the winter cost figures in a new spiral notebook. He'd filled the first one. By 1978, 4 other operators in Custer County were growing field peas for their own herds. Not all at the same scale. Walt Pritchard tried 12 acres in the spring of 1977, got 31 bushels per acre. Called Merle in July to report it. Merle was in the field when Walt called. Norma took the message. Merle called back that evening. Walt said the peas looked different than he expected. Said the cattle had taken to them without trouble. Merle said that was his experience too. In the fall of 1979, a man from a farm magazine in Omaha drove out to Custer County. Someone at the extension office had mentioned Merle's operation. The writer was a young woman named Patricia Gaines. She spent a morning at the farm, walked the pea fields in late September. The crop was already harvested by then, but the field was still showing residue, and went through the feed logs Merle had kept since 1974. 6 spiral notebooks by then. Every winter, every pound, every cost calculation. She asked Merle what the savings had been. He went to the kitchen and came back with a sheet of paper. He'd been adding it up. The cumulative savings from the winter of 1974-1975 through the winter of 1978-1979, just under $68,000. 5 winters. Patricia Gaines wrote a number down. Asked him to confirm it. He confirmed it. The article ran in the December issue of the Nebraska Farmer. 2 columns, page 14, included a photograph of the grain bins and a brief description of the ration formula. Merle's name was in the headline. He read the article once, put it in the folder in the kitchen drawer with Dr. Halsey's letter from 1972. The co-op in Broken Bow saw the article. Fenner didn't say anything to Merle directly, but the co-op started carrying field pea seed in the spring of 1980. 2 varieties. Merle noticed it when he came in for mineral mix. He bought his pea seed from a wholesale supplier in Grand Island by then, bought it by the 1,000-pound pallet at 19 cents per pound. Better price than anyone in Broken Bow could offer. Through the 1980s, the system didn't change much. The herd grew. By 1984, Merle was running 130 cows, needed more peas. Expanded to 9, added a 3rd grain bin. The pea varieties improved as he tried new ones from the extension service trials. By 1987, he was averaging 38 to 41 bushels per acre in good years, 28 to 30 in dry years. The winter of 1984-1985 was the worst weather test. January temperatures in Custer County dropped to -22 Fahrenheit on 3 consecutive nights in the second week. Cattle in that kind of cold need more energy. Merle increased the corn portion of the ration by 4 pounds per head per day for the 2 coldest weeks. Used reserves he'd built into his storage specifically for that scenario. His bins held 14,000 bushels of corn by then, against a normal winter need of around 9,500. The cattle came through. Body condition scores in March 1985 were the same as any mild winter. Calving that April went normally. First calf hit the ground on April 3rd. Merle was in the barn at 5 in the morning when it happened. Watched the cow clean it off. Went back to the house for coffee. Walt Pritchard lost 3 cows to weather-related complications that January, had run short of feed toward the end of the cold snap. Called the co-op for an emergency delivery. Waited 3 days. The co-op truck couldn't get down Pritchard's road until the county blade came through on the 14th. The co-op was backed up. Every cattleman in the county had called the same week. Fenner told Walt he'd do his best. That was all he could offer. Merle had enough. Didn't need to call anyone. Had 4,500 bushels of corn in reserve above his normal winter need, and 14,000 pounds of peas in the smaller bin he hadn't touched yet. He'd built the reserve deliberately, after a short feed scare in 1979 that had cost him 2 weeks of anxiety and a phone call to his brother in Kearney asking if he had surplus hay to sell. That had been the last time he'd come close to running short. By 1990, Merle Adcock was the most closely watched cattle operator in the eastern Sandhills. Not because he'd done anything dramatic. Because he hadn't done anything dramatic. For 16 consecutive winters, he'd fed his own cattle, his own feed, and kept his co-op bill to the mineral mix alone. The cumulative savings from 1974 to 1990 had reached, by his own calculation on a legal pad in February of that year, $178,000. The latter, year by year, was in the spiral notebooks. Winter 1974-1975 saved $13,680. Winter 1975-1976, winter 1976-1977-77, winter 1977-1978 saved 11,250. Lower pea yields. Winter 1978-1979 saved $14,100. By the end of the 5th winter, the cumulative total had passed $65,000. By the 10th winter, 1983-1984, it had passed $120,000. By 1990, $178,000. He didn't share that number publicly. Keith Dorsey asked him once, in 1988, what the total had come to. Merle told him the approximate range. Dorsey wrote it in his own notebook. Didn't put it in the newsletter. Merle retired from active farming in 1993. He was 70 years old. His son Dale took over the operation. Dale had grown up working the pea crop every summer since he was 12. Knew the system the way he knew how to drive the tractor. He kept the pea acreage at 90, kept the 3 bins, kept the same ration formula with minor adjustments as the Extension Service updated the protein recommendations. Dale's first full winter on his own, 1993-1994, $10,800 in total feed costs. The co-op's equivalent would have run $23,400. Merle drove out the following March, walked the feed yard with Dale, looked at the bins, looked at the cattle 128 head, coming off winter in good condition. Calves on the ground already in the front pen, the early ones a week old. He didn't stay long, looked at the operation for a while, went back to the truck. Dale is still running the place. The 3 bins Merle built are still standing. He's added a 4th. The pea acreage has grown to 120, enough for 160 cows through the longest Nebraska winters. The first pea field, the 18-acre patch east of the barn that Merle planted in March 1973, still goes into peas most years. Same ground, same drill, different varieties now, same idea. The co-op in Broken Bow is still on Pawnee Street. Fenner retired in 1984. The mineral mix costs more than it did. Everything does. Dale's co-op bill comes in the 2nd week of November, same as always. It covers the mineral mix and nothing else. It works the same way it always did. 52 years.